In other news, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says it's too early to talk about a vote at the UN Security Council on new sanctions against North Korea. Lavrov insists that any pressure should be balanced against restarting talks with Pyongyang. He also says efforts must be made to revive the political process while pressuring North Korea. He was speaking at a press conference with his French counterpart in Moscow. Russia has repeatedly said it's opposed to stepping up pressure on the North. Russian President Vladimir Putin has recently said that the international community must avoid pushing Pyongyang into a corner. He said such a move would be dangerous. Joining us live now from Ontario is Mr. Jason Unruhe, who is a political commentator, joining us live now via Skype. Jason, what do you make of President Putin's warning here that pressuring the North will not work?
Oh, pressuring the DPRK to abandon its nuclear program is not going to work. The very point of the nuclear program is to deter any kind of aggressive acts against the country. So then by turning around and taking aggressive acts against the country, you're only confirming what it is that the DPRK is afraid of. The elephant in the room here, which it seems to be no one wants to talk about, is the fact that the severe nuclear capability of the DPRK is already here. The ability to defend themselves is already here, and there won't be any getting the nuclear weapons away from the DPRK. At this point, with all of the threats that has been thrown against the country, they'd be foolish to just simply abandon them at this time. They would be leaving themselves open to a terrible strike by the United States. Russia very clearly does not want a war in the DPRK with the United States. This war benefits nobody at all. The United States has a potential to benefit, but that can be questioned by how devastating the war actually becomes. It's much better for both China and Russia if the situation were to remain absolutely peaceful. But Russia is worried that a real war could break out. At this point, it's simply facetious to even think that these weapons can be strong-armed away from the DPRK. If there is going to be any kind of peace, there needs to be a dialogue. Now that the military option is definitely off the table and would only be pursued by a madman. Thus, any aggressive acts taken against the DPRK would not forward any kind of peace process, but would actually make the whole situation worse. So the DPRK is clear that they don't want a war of threats of being invaded.
All right, Jason, we'll leave there at that, but of course, as always, we appreciate your insight.